In the ancient land of Phrygia, there existed a renowned brotherhood of warriors called the Korybantes, which have been linked to the Koryos as well. These warriors were also known within ancient Greece as kouretes. From what is known about them, they were closely attuned to the divine and wielded extraordinary powers, acting as protectors of sacred mysteries. Born of the union between Apollo, known also as the wolf god, the radiant god of light and music, and the Muse Thalia. Sometimes the Muses being referred to as water nymphs, associated with the springs of Helicon and with Kouretes. In Greek mythology, Korybantes, who is the son of the goddess Cybele, is said to have given the name to the Korybantes. They are known as the dancing priests of Phrygia. The Phrygians were an ancient Indo-European speaking people who inhabited western Anatolia. Phrygia, an ancient civilization, made significant contributions to the cultural landscape of its time. This Bronze Age culture had a notable impact on various aspects including music and iconography. The earliest roots of Greek music can be traced in part to Phrygia. This musical influence was transmitted through Greek colonies in Anatolia, where the Phrygian mode played a prominent role. In ancient Greek music, this mode was associated with a warlike spirit. Phrygia was also linked to the use of the aulos, a musical instrument featuring two reed pipes. In classical Greek art and imagery, Phrygia is symbolized by the distinctive Phrygian cap. This cap was notably worn by figures like Paris, a Trojan prince, and Mithras. Its legacy can even be seen in modern depictions of the Liberty Cap. The Phrygians also had connections to archaic Thrace and worshipped a variety of deities. Among them, Sabazios, the god of the sky and a father figure, was often depicted riding on horseback. The Phrygian pantheon also included notable deities like Cybele, Dionysus Zagreus, and Artemis. The Korybantes also playing an important role with them as well. The Korybantes are both also linked to protecting Zeus as the divine child, but also Dionysus Zagreus from the Orphic Mysteries, which we will be going into later within the book. Both of these children, who they protect, being linked to thunder. They are known to have protected both Zeus and Dionysus Zagreus from the Titans and other chaotic forces, where then finally in the story of Zeus, for instance, the thunder god Zeus overcomes his father Kronos, who is connected to both the serpent and dragon. Next to Kronos in archaic times, to have been associated with having the form of a three-headed serpent or a separate serpent. One of the animals linked to Zeus being the bull next to the eagle. And Zeus is also known for punishing Odysseus and his crew when they killed the cattle of Helios. Zeus on top of this had the epithet Lyceus, same as Apollo, linked to a wolf cult, and was thus known in more archaic form as Wolf Zeus. This is in connection with the archaic festival of the Lycaea on the slopes of Mount Lycaon, Wolf Mountain, the tallest peak in rustic Arcadia. Here the young, the ephebes, who were the participants, would undergo a werewolf transformation, which we will go into later more. But coming back to the Korybantes and Zeus, according to Apollodorus, Rhea, after giving birth to Zeus in a cave in Dicta, gives him to the nymphs Adrastea and Ida, daughters of Lyceus, to nurse. They feed him on the milk of the she-goat Amalthea, while the Korybantes guard the cave and beat their spears on their shields so that Kronos cannot hear the infants crying. The Korybantes were next known to use drums, rattles, and the aulos for trance dances as well. The Korybantes within the Orphic Mysteries, connected to the Greek Orpheus, also had the sacred responsibility of restoring harmony and balance, facilitating the rebirth of Dionysus, the god associated with the cycles of nature's growth and decay. And they were originally connected to the nymphs and Hecate instead of Rhea or Phrygian goddess Cybele. Dionysus here represented the divine child and thus the inner child that carries the potential of rebirth and the restoration of the authentic self. Orpheus himself then also was dedicated to Hecate instead. You can see this also with him creating temples to Hecate, known for dog and cattle sacrifice, instead of these other figures. Hecate is also revered to as mistress of the animals originally. In the end, the rites of the Korybantes were initiation rites for warriors and were connected to the wild mountainside, inventors of metalworking, shepherding, and hunting. And their Greek original name as kouretes was connected to the word kouros, meaning youths. Where Euripides in Bacchaea, a Greek tragedy from the 5th century BC, wrote, "A concealed chamber known to the kouretes, sacred grotto in the Cretan grove where Zeus was nurtured, where for our pleasure the triple-crested Korybantes tightly stretched the circular drumskin, creating an ecstatic rhythm to accompany the enchanting melodies of the aulos. It was then that divine Rhea discovered the drum's ability to enhance the completeness of her Bacchic melodies." Similarly, as with the more ancient Koryos tradition, the Korybantes sacred rites symbolically provided the initiate with a similar ritual. The dance in armor was then also seen as a male coming-of-age initiation ritual linked to a warrior victory celebration. They were next also primitive musicians and seers, and there were different groups of these outside of Phrygia as well. You had the kouretes, who were similar to other groups such as the Korybantes of Ebeo and Samothrace, where they performed the korybas, an orgiastic dance performed by armored men with clashing spear and shield, accompanied by the beat of tambourines and drums, whilst they would make war cries. Zeus, with the kouretes in Crete, was called the Great Kouros, and was intimately connected with the transition of boys into manhood. Through this shared ritual dance, they would symbolically protect the divine child, which is an archetype associated with the birth of the archetype of the self from a Jungian lens. Next to their link to Cybele, the Korybantes also had a clear link to a thunder god, both in the sense of Zeus and also later with Dionysus Zagreus in the Orphic Mysteries. Within both of these traditions, they are facing the forces of chaos, represented by the Titans. Similarly, we can see this with the Koryos, who would face these forces of darkness within winter symbolically. From a Jungian lens, this can be seen as representing a facing of the shadow. Through these rites, they then also thus go through a process of individuation, where they would, from a Jungian lens, do shadow work and integrate their primal side. And such rites of passage and dances, as you can see later throughout the book, used to be an integral part regarding these ancient societies, something that not only men but also women would undergo, and has been a consistent practice within different Indo-European pagan cultures. When it now comes to Apollo, we earlier talked about how the Korybantes are descendant of Apollo. And I want to go deeper into Apollo as a figure within this video as well, because there's much more to Apollo than him just being the radiant Olympian god of the sun. And he might be widely known as the radiant Olympian god of the sun, and is celebrated for his multifaceted domains as the patron of music, poetry, light, medicine, and truth. However, one of his intriguing and lesser-known titles is Lycigenes, meaning born of a wolf, as Atzma pointed out in his work on the titles of Apollo. This fascinating aspect of Apollo as a wolf god has often been overshadowed by his other attributes, yet it holds significant cultural and mythological importance. In the ancient world, the worship of Apollo Lycios carried diverse connotations depending on the specific region of Greece. In Athens, it was closely associated with the realm of warfare, while in Argos it symbolized political power. Nonetheless, nearly every locality held a unique myth or legend connecting Apollo Lycios with the enigmatic and the wolf. And a compelling testament to Apollo's affinity with wolves lies in the ancient stories and artifacts. Wolves were believed to safeguard the treasures dedicated to Apollo. Notably, near the grand altar at Delphi, an iron wolf statue adorned with inscriptions was a prominent feature, where the mythological narrative surrounding Apollo further illuminate his wolfish associations. Hera usually is the one to have sent the monstrous python, a giant serpent, against Leto to pursue and harm her. In one version, Leto, Apollo's mother, sought refuge from the wrath of Hera, the queen of the gods, and the serpent she sent, by transforming herself into a shrew and finally a she-wolf during her journey from the land of the Hyperboreans to the island of Delos. This remarkable act allowed her to escape Hera's vengeful pursuit, reinforcing the notion of Apollo's wolf-born lineage as recounted by the ancient poet Homer. Similarly, with the Korybantes, we can see this link to the nymphs and Hecate, next to their connection to a thunder god. Apollo also being the son of Zeus, who is a thunder god. The Korybantes also has a tradition being linked to Apollo. The wolf motif also appears across various Greek deities, with Zeus, Apollo, Artemis, and Leto all having connections to this animal. One such intriguing epithet is Artemis Lycaena, which translates to she-wolf. Just as Apollo's title suggests his birth, it is possible that this descriptor alludes to the circumstances of Artemis's origin, enhancing the twins' connection to the wolf archetype. We can see also something similar with the wolf-born twins Romulus and Remus, who also are linked to the Koryos tradition as well, them being nurtured by a she-wolf. In addition to these divine connections, ancient folklore from Arcadia also introduces the transformative aspect of the wolf. Antus, from one myth, as Hausler points out, was said to be chosen by a lot and led to a sacred lake in the region. There, he embarked on a ritual that involved suspending his clothes on an oak tree, often associated with the thunder god, swimming across the lake and retreating into the wilderness. During this period, lasting 9 years, he was believed to take on the form of a wolf and associate with other creatures of the same kind. If he successfully refrained from harming another human throughout this time, he would return to the lake. After swimming across it, he would regain his human appearance, with the addition of 9 years to his age, and reclaim his previous attire, which is very reminiscent of the Koryos tradition itself as a rite of passage. Pausanias claims that this was a boy who was selected by lot, going out into the wilderness, living like a wolf. There is also further evidence of worship of Apollo Lyceus, also known as Apollo Lycaeos or Apollo Lycaeos, in Arcadia, a region in the central Peloponnese. According to a legend from this location, Zeus was born here and cared for by the nymphs. The epithet Zeus Lycaeos, meaning wolf Zeus, is also found within the Lycaea, which was the main Arcadian festival. A grove was associated with the cult of Apollo as a wolf god, where he transformed himself into a wolf to hunt with his pack of wolves. The cult of Apollo Lyceus was one of the most important religious traditions in ancient Greece, and it was centered around a sanctuary on Mount Lycaeus in Arcadia. And the cult of Apollo Lycaeus originated in this region of Arcadia in southern Greece, where wolves were an important symbol of the wilderness and the untamed forces of nature. And the cult was centered around a sanctuary on this mountain, where a complex system of rituals and initiations were performed. The rituals and initiations of the cult of Apollo were shrouded in secrecy and are not well documented, but they are believed to have been focused on preparing young men for their roles as warriors and community leaders. The young men who participated in the Koryos tradition also similarly would undergo a series of trials and initiations that were designed to test their strength, courage, and loyalty, and to prepare them for the challenges of adulthood. The Spartans similarly also had such wolf-linked rituals. In Sparta, which is in Laconia, the Aulos was linked with Apollo and even accompanied the hoplites into battle. Laconia being south of Arcadia itself, where the cult of Apollo Lycaeus was prominent. The Spartans themselves had the Cryptia, linked to wolves, that also served as a similar initiation rite into manhood. This was related to the military training of young Spartans, during which they traveled across the state's territory, secretly getting to know the situation and the terrain. The Cryptia are then also sometimes considered a remnant of the Koryos tradition for the Spartans. Now coming back to the cult of Mount Lyceus. On the mountain called Mount Lycaon, there was also a burnt offering site as well. The Arcadians called the mountain Olympus and Holy Mountain, with it also having a place called Kouretes, which refers to the place Zeus is said to be born. The locals, according to Pausanias, said that this was the birthplace of Zeus and not Crete. The Mount Lycaon excavation team detected ritual presence at a site that went back to 3000 BC, also finding the image of a rock crystal with the image of a bull. This is around the time when they started building Stonehenge, to give you a perspective, which is in the late Neolithic to early Bronze Age, and is called lasting from then to the Hellenistic era, making this cult practice very ancient. Pausanias also records the presence of a mound of earth on the highest point of the mountain. This was the altar to Zeus Lyceus, and he describes two pillars near the altar which had been topped by golden eagles. Further, he mentions that secret sacrifices took place on this altar, and that these rites were from extreme antiquity. And the archaeological dig found things such as iron blades and rings that seem to have been offered next to animal bones from cows and pigs. Drinking and feasting rituals also likely took place, as they also found the remains of drinking vessels. And no consistent layer of human remains were found, but they did recently find a skeleton of a boy, the exact nature of his death still being unclear. Because at the time, in ancient Greece, due to the secretive nature of the rituals, there were many rumors surrounding human sacrifice. Yet the truth regarding this is still up in the air. What is, however, now established is that in later times in the valley, they held horse races in a hippodrome, racing track, connected to this cult. Now, coming back to the cult of Apollo Lyceus, one of the key rituals was the Lycaea, which was a major festival held every 4 years at the sanctuary on Mount Lyceus. During the festival, the young men who had completed their initiations would participate in athletic competitions and other contests, and would be recognized as full members of the warrior community. Something interesting of note here as well is that the etymology of Apollo's name has been suggested by scholar W. Burkert to be the Doric word apella, meaning public assembly, and the Doric month apelaios, which would connect him with the Doric public assembly of arms-bearing men. Apelaios also being the first month in Delphi, connected to the public assembly, where the newly initiated young citizens would gather, also linked to the annual rites of purification. Bernard Sergeant, specialist in comparative mythology, shows in the Book of the Gods, Celts and Greeks that the identity of Apollo and the Celtic god Luke are also similar, and for him, the god is not Asian, but Greco-Celtic, and beyond that, Indo-European. According to him, it has a counterpart in the Germanic Wotan also. Apollo would, according to him, be the divine version of the human king. We can see this as Homeric poems systematically also give him the epithet Anax, meaning tribe leader. Further, Daniel A. Gerherson also sees Apollo as a god of Indo-European origin, whose main attributes would be brought together in the expression as Apollo as wolf god, which seems to be his most archaic form. This would then also explain Apollo's role as guardian of the Athebes, which refers to young warriors who complete their adult initiation, next to his associations with the Korybantes. In that sense, Apollo Lyceus, the wolf god, is the master of the passages, the god who transforms the chaotic forces of the werewolf brotherhoods from adolescence to adulthood. The later Hellenistic popular version, in that sense, where they linked Apollo to the sun, like Artemis to the moon, moved them away from their primitive character as wild gods. According to other legends, Apollo then also spends the winter months in Hyperborea each year, only returning to his place of worship Delphi or Delos in spring. Through a Jungian lens, when we look at this form of Apollo, we can see this as him representing the hero wrestling with instinct and trying to integrate it, going from a state of being overwhelmed to wrestling with it. self-control in that sense. His later ability to shapeshift into a wolf and his wolf form can in this sense be seen as his mastery over instinct. Apollo is then often also seen as a symbol of the conscious ego from a Jungian lens, as he represents the rational, logical, and ordered aspect of the psyche. At the same time, however, Apollo is also associated with the darker aspects of the psyche, such as the shadow, which contains repressed instincts and desires. In this sense, Apollo can be seen as both integrating and controlling instinct, as he seeks to find a balance between the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. His later Hellenistic solar form being connected to the Jungian self, symbolizing both the life-giving and destructive side. Apollo himself is thus the master of the wolf. He is the god of calm and light and reason, who integrated the dark forces and the passages between dark and light. Apollo represents the calm, calculating warrior as opposed to the wild berserker, who belongs in the realm of the other war god, Ares. Similar to the distinction between the Ulf Hetnar and the berserker in the Norse tradition. In more popular Greek mythology, however, Apollo is the god of light, music, poetry, prophecy, and archery, among other things, and he is often depicted as a handsome, youthful, and athletic figure. And one other aspect that is well known is his most famous story, which is the slaying of the serpent Python. Python was a giant serpent who lived in Delphi and was said to be the offspring of Gaia, the earth, and Tartarus, the underworld. The serpent terrorized the people of Delphi and was considered a great threat to the community. Apollo, who was just a young god at the time, decided to put an end to Python's reign of terror. He journeyed to Delphi and, using his bows and arrows, killed the serpent. The story of Apollo and Python has several interpretations as well. One interpretation is that it represents the triumph of light and reason over darkness and chaos. Python is often associated with the earth and the chthonic underworld powers, while Apollo is associated with the sky and the powers of light and reason. In this interpretation, the slaying of Python represents the victory of Apollo and his powers of light and reason over the darkness and chaos represented by Python. And another common interpretation is that it represents the victory of the Olympians over the Titans. Python was said to have been born from Gaia, who was the mother of the Titans, while Apollo was born from Zeus, the king of the Olympians. Where there's also an interpretation that the slaying of Python is a metaphor for the replacement of the old pagan ways by the new Olympian religion, and the triumph of Apollo as a new god of prophecy and oracle. But in all interpretations, the slaying of Python by Apollo marks the beginnings of Apollo's reign as the god of Delphi, and the establishment of the oracle at Delphi. Though from a Proto-Indo-European lens, what we can see here with Apollo linked to the wolf, the slaying of the serpent, was connected to a mother goddess, is a remnant of the three-toe myth and by extension the Koryos. Now when it comes to the Titans, Kronos, as I said earlier, is also linked to the serpent. In his tyrannical form from a Jungian lens, he represents a state of overwhelm from the unconscious, through a disconnection to instinct, where the need of control is externalized. The deifying power of the underworld, usually in serpentine form, also cloaks the god in a mask of terror, where the self is cloaked through the mask of the shadow. Zeus, connected to the eagle, representing order and law, and trying to wrestle with instinct. This rule is mirrored in the afterlife, where Kronos rules over Elysium or the island of the blessed. The contradictions between tyrant and benign ruler are an essential part of the god's nature, representing both the shadow state as much as the link to Kronos under the rule of Uranos in its original nature. Kronos' feast day was December 17th, and the Saturnalia continued for 7 days thereafter, despite attempts of emperors to shorten it. His statue, kept bound with rope during the rest of the year, was ritually untied on this day. Social divisions were within acknowledged limits either abolished or inverted during Saturnalia. The wearing of the felt hats, representing liberation, was customary for all during these celebrations. It was customary to give gifts on the last day. Originally, these were clay heads, likely representing former sacrifices. And Kronos in this form symbolized the return to the Golden Age. It is also representing a return to the primordial ways of being, the more archaic way of being of the early hunter-gatherer people. In that sense, with both the rituals of the Arcadians and Spartans, they reconnect the participants of these rituals with their primal instincts in a way that allows them to become conscious of them, and with that, from a Jungian lens, integrate this aspect of the shadow. Where with the Saturnalia, the sense of liberation frees the person of their persona, so of their rigid social mask, and gives the person the space to express what is in their shadow, so that the shadow would not build up and cause societal issues. And these type of warrior initiation rituals are in that sense and also important for not only the well-being of the individual, but also the revitalization of the community. It connects the individuals not just to their primal and instinctual side, and with it to their source of vitality, but also next to this creates and upkeeps the social and communal bonds. Obviously, within a more ancient sense, these warrior initiation rituals also having a practical function regarding training for becoming a warrior, and also connected to the protection of the tribe and community. Though the sense of rejuvenation that comes with this cannot be understated, having practiced such a type of ritual myself for the last 2 years. So far, regarding the Koryos linked rituals, we went into the Korybantes with a similar kouretes, but also Wolf Apollo connected to the mountain of Wolf Zeus. The wolf being an important totem animal for the Koryos, and their link to the thunder god also being an important aspect, next to their possible link to a goddess figure. Within the book, we will then still further go into the Koryos connection regarding Rome, with the linked Mars and Kouretes, the Norse wild hunt, and finally King Arthur and the linked Celtic form of the Koryos, the Fianna warrior band, before going into this potential link of the Koryos with a goddess figure, something that also appears in Rome.